Hello, I'm Barbara Peters, welcoming you to another episode in our criminal calendar. We have a real double treat for you this month. Author Sharon Penman, and following her interview, author Daniel Woodrell. You may wonder what the bridge is between them, and that will be revealed as we go along. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here. I was saying to you earlier today how thrilled I am that you have ventured into mystery after all the wonderful historical novels you've written. What was the impetus for your taking on a career in crime?
Truthfully, I think I was in danger of burning out on historical fiction after doing the 800-page When Christ and His Saints Slept. That was a very difficult book to research and to write, and Stephen and Maud, my chief characters, could both be total pains. And so I thought I wanted a change of pace, and I love mysteries. I read just about everything that's published, and so it just seemed like a natural segue for me.
Well, I think that makes very good sense. And of course, with Stephen and Maud, you didn't want to stray into Brother Cadfael territory, did you?
Actually, I sort of have a veiled homage to Brother Cadfael in Saints. One of my characters is ambushed by bandits, and he's rescued by two peddlers, and they tell him he needs to go to Shrewsbury to get his wounds treated, and they tell him he should see a doctor there, or a monk at the abbey who is very skilled in the healing arts.
Aren't you clever? Do you know there is a new book that the University of Kentucky Popular Press just published, and it's called Cordially Yours, Brother Cadfael.
Really?
And it is about his cordials and his herbalism and so forth. I just saw it. It's brand new, and if you're a fan of this, you might be interested in it.
Yeah, well, they have so many books that have sort of spread out from the original mysteries, the Cadfael Country and books like that in England. It's like a cottage industry.
Absolutely so. Well, I remember, because I was such a fan of it, your first historical novel, at least I think it's your first historical novel, The Sun and Splendor, is about what I think of as the last Plantagenet ruler, Richard III. How do you feel about him?
I think Richard was the last Plantagenet too, and he was certainly, I think, one of history's more maligned monarchs.
Oh, you do?
Most definitely. My Richard is a revisionist Richard. He's not Shakespeare's bottled spider, not by a long shot.
Do you think of him as actually a good man in difficult times?
I think he was, really, yes. And I'm not totally alone out there in that. There actually is a Richard III Society that supports him. And it's rather interesting that this is a controversy that is still so active after 500 years.
Absolutely so. Are you a fan of Josephine Tey's The Daughter of Time?
Oh, yes, I enjoyed that enormously. And that's the book that people most often mention to me when they're discussing my book, and they'll say that I became interested in Richard III after reading The Daughter of Time.
It's a lovely book.
Yeah.
I mean, her evidence is a bit flimsy because I think it's largely based on her psychological interpretation of the portrait,
Yes.
isn't it?
Well, I think of it as great propaganda for our side.
And then Barbara Mertz, I think it is Barbara Michaels, but maybe it's Elizabeth Peters. Didn't she write a mystery?
The Killings of Richard III. I loved that book. Yes, I thought that was wonderful. It was hysterically funny. She's one of my favorite mystery writers anyway, because everything is done tongue-in-cheek. And she did a nice job of satirizing kindly, though, the Richard III Society people in that book.
Absolutely so. There's also an author, and I think his name is Guy Townsend, who wrote the revision of The Daughter of Time, throwing it back. I can't think of the name of the book at the moment. He was from Oregon. I think a scholar there, going back to the no, it really was Richard the villain. As I think I said to you earlier, I've always plumped for Henry VII, but you claim lack of access.
Unfortunately, yes. I would love to pin it on Henry if I could, but I think the boys were dead before he took the throne. But just for the record, though, I think he would have killed them if they'd still been alive.
Not your favorite Tudor monarch.
Most definitely not.
What got you interested in writing Sun and Splendor? Because you were, at that time, you were actually practicing law when you wrote the book, weren't you?
No, well, actually, when I first became interested in Richard III, I was going to the University of Texas, and so I was getting a degree in history. And I stumbled onto this story a revisionist story of Richard, and it seemed to me that once I got into it, I was fascinated and appalled to discover that there's no real evidence that the boys were murdered or that Richard was the murderer. And I had assumed that this was a historical gospel, something that had been passed down. It turned out to be history rewritten by the victors, the Tudors. So that's when I decided that I would write about Richard III, and I had no idea it would take me 13 years, though.
Good Lord, was it that? Well, I know you mentioned in a program we did for the Tempe Library this afternoon that this book almost never got written because the manuscript mysteriously disappeared somewhere in the middle.
I had 500 pages done. I've been working on it for 4 years, and it was stolen from my car under rather mysterious circumstances. I was explaining to the audience at the Tempe Library that I think probably a child took it, drawn by the new binder I had just put on the manuscript the week before. But my other theory is vengeful Tudor ghost.
Vengeful Tudor
Yes.
ghost. I've had to nail you for this reinterpretation. But what happened? I mean, the manuscript was stolen. Did you just plunge in again, or did you find that so debilitating you set the whole thing aside?
I found that the loss was so traumatic that I couldn't write again. I would try periodically, but it was as if the well had gone totally dry. And I wasn't able to actually start writing seriously again for almost 6 years.
How awful. But do you think
Yeah.
the story kind of roiled around in your head, and then when you sat down, you were able to do it fairly easily?
Yes, I think that it was sort of, germinating in the back of my brain because I continued to research during this 6-year barren stretch. So I think in the back of my mind, I was always hoping that one day the logjam would break, and one day, fortunately, it did.
And did you actually go then to England and research part of the book?
Yes, I actually quit my job and moved to York, and I had a small insurance settlement that allowed me to gamble on the book. It worked out really well. The money ran out just as the book was done, because I think I would have had trouble getting back into the practice of law. I would have had to explain this odd 3-year gap in my employment history, and I could see myself being interviewed and saying, well, I wanted to write this book about this dead English king. I don't think that would have played too well in the tax and corporate field.
Probably not. Well, fortunately for you and for us, I gather the book was quite a success when you published 1982.
Yes, and 83 in England.
And you had very good reviews.
Yes, we were fortunate. Well, there was one really bad review of The Sun and Splendor, but most of the reviews were very good.
And it's a very weighty book, as I recall. In fact, wasn't your first draft so long that you had to do some serious surgery to it?
Yes, I had this incredibly bloated manuscript that was over 1,000 pages, and that was at the halfway point. And after I exercised some discipline, thanks to the editor who would later become my editor, I still had a 1,238-page manuscript that I submitted at the very end.
Was this because you were just detailing the story, or are you a writer who really enjoys accuracy and detailing the whole setting and the landscape in your historicals?
I do really enjoy that, Barbara. I like to create as firm a factual foundation as I can for my books. However, having said that, I should also confess that I sit down to write a postcard and it turns into a 4-page letter. So part of it was my own natural inclination.
You're prolix by
Yes.
nature. So have you learned to self-edit?
Yes, I've had to, and fortunately I have an excellent editor at Henry Holt, and we've been together now since 1981, so we work well as a team.
And she knows she has to start pruning when they come in.